where do Asian values fall on the political spectrum? So you're saying you know what it feels like to be an average Asian guy?
Yeah, I'll admit it.
SoCal Asians kind of get credited for pushing like the image of Asian Americans to the rest of the world. I don't feel like you can be like, oh, Asians, our parents came here with $50 in their pocket, then they made it, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden be like, yeah, but the media kept me from living the life that I wanted. The media shrunk my dick. Yeah, we're just getting straight to it.
Welcome to The Tiger in the Room. My name is Hannah, and I'll be your host. We are a podcast series that is here to talk about the current and ongoing national crisis of anti-Asian hate crimes. A lot of us first heard about anti-Asian hate in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. We believe that hate against Asians and Asian Americans is not just seen in acts of violence. It is also seen when our community is silenced, invisibilized, and erased. We plan to talk about the challenges that modern-day Asian Americans face every day, whether it's in the workplace, in public, in media, and so on. We also talk to the organizers, activists, and change makers who are fighting for our community and fighting for change. We hope you'll join us.
On today's episode of The Tiger in the Room, we're at Paper Sun's Cafe, a new spot in Manhattan's Chinatown with a name rooted in history. Paper Sons were Chinese immigrants who, after the 1882 Exclusion Act, used false identities to build new lives in America, stories of resilience that shaped this neighborhood. On today's interview with Andrew Fung, we're here at this cafe whose mission aligns with ours, creating space for conversation, storytelling, and community. Whether you're here for a perfectly brewed coffee, a classic tea, or some amazing authentic snacks, Paper Sons delivers. If you're in Manhattan Chinatown, definitely stop by. Welcome back to another episode of The Tiger in the Room. For those of you who have been following us all season, we wrapped up our first season this year, but we are very excited to announce a bonus episode with a very special guest, Andrew Fung.
I'm the bonus episode?
Oh, I'm sorry,
I don't get to lead season number 2? No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for having me.
We could think about it, but yeah. Bonus special guest.
By the way, I judge a podcast on how many cameras are set up, and you're doing pretty good, so.
Thank you, that's a big compliment from you. So as you guys know, we created this podcast as a space to talk about, the Asian American experience, especially when it comes to Asian hate, racism, and discrimination, topics that we don't feel are always talked with a lot of nuance or intellectual honesty. I don't think it's a secret that the Fung Bros have really pioneered the forefront of having those types of conversations. So we're very excited to have Andrew on the podcast today to talk about some of these things and about their hot sauce and much more. So Andrew, once again, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
But yeah, for those of you who grew up in the YouTube era like my generation did, I don't think Andrew Fung really needs an introduction, but by way of introduction, Andrew is one half of the Fung Bros, a very popular YouTuber, comedian, rapper, entrepreneurial duo with his brother David Fung. They're originally from the West Coast, but now they're based in New York, and they've been making moves out here for the last couple of years.
Trying to just do enough where I have to stay in New York.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do enough, then you're always gonna be like ungrounded here, and then you can just go wherever. But I like New York. I want to stay here.
So I want to talk to you about that. So you guys are from Seattle originally, and then you guys moved to the
different
SGV.
parts of LA, but 626 SGV.
Okay.
Always has a special place in my heart. But the energy and just the vibe and like just the community, I feel like in New York is like incredible. You can't beat it. Like literally cannot beat it.
So what brought you guys here?
Our affinity for New York started a long time ago. Like it wasn't just this past 5 years when I moved here during the second half of COVID. This was our longest stint here so far. But in years past, I'd actually lived in New York back in I want to say 2015 for like half a year. And then back in 2017, we lived here for half a year. Or my brother was here for a year and then I was here for half a year. And then, so we always wanted to go to New York. We always loved it. And we always had really good friends and always had a good time. And it was always very productive and just felt like, if you could do something in New York, it means so much more. Like this is the city to do something in. And also it was just fun and we just vibed with a lot of people. So we always were trying to get back to New York. And then during the pandemic, we were in downtown LA and then it was just like zombie land out there. And then we got a good COVID deal out here, which shout out to the COVID deal. Not to COVID, but to the deal. Yeah, when it came out. And then I just like to be out here. My brother currently, as of filming this, is overseas. He's spending a lot of time in Bangkok and Asia, exploring new opportunities, and he's still working and creating his content out there. So right as of this moment, I'm in New York mostly.
Got it. So I read some of your interviews about when you guys moved to the SGV. It was kind of a bit of a, like, you guys had gone from Seattle where you were one of maybe the few Asians where you grew up?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely Asians in Seattle, but I think it's so different than Southern California, like, or even the Bay, if you're talking about the communities and like the amount of Asians.
So I wanted to ask you, when you come here, right, because New York is, obviously there's a lot of Asians here.
Yeah, it's very diverse.
But I would say it's a little bit different from the West Coast in terms of,
for sure. I mean,
generationally, like how do you compare the way you see like the Asian American
So to compare
here?
West Coast Asians to East Coast Asians, let's just focus on the Chinese populations, because I think there's even different amounts of different types of Asians. On the West Coast, there is definitely more Southeast Asians.
Okay.
Like New York is notorious for having mid pho.
Okay.
No, the pho's
Fair.
considered mid. I think there is good pho here, by the way. But traditionally that was the stereotype, was that, there's not enough Viets, or like the Vietnamese out here are mostly Chinese Vietnamese, so it's like kind of Chineseized pho, whatever. So obviously, like, if you want great Southeast Asian food, particularly Vietnamese food and Filipino food, it's probably more heavy on the West Coast for sure. Seattle, we had a lot of Viet and Filipino and Cambodians. I didn't really even know that many Koreans until college.
Really, in the West Coast?
Yeah, because they didn't live in my area.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they're from like Federal Way, North End, and then we meet at the campus.
Got it, I see.
Right?
Okay.
But so I didn't really grow up with too many. But I mean, overall, obviously the West Coast and the East Coast vibe is completely different. In general, I feel like the East Coast, to me, it is the older part of America. It's also, in a way, more racialized, or at least more race conscious. I feel like, because it's like, every community is down to rep itself, but everybody's kind of mixing. Like if you go, like, getting to New York, it's like everybody's like, oh yeah, that's my Dominican friend, that's my Chinese friend.
Yeah, that's true.
But they're all homies, but they will just call it out because
Right.
you understand that each other's culture means that much.
Interesting.
And I don't mind it doesn't feel weird being like, oh yo, that's the Chinese friends, or like I gotta, like, always saying that,
Right.
And it's just kind of like funny to me too, where but I think on the West Coast, there's kind of a sense like maybe you don't need to talk about it as much, or maybe that's a place that people go to like more forget
That's an interesting.
about it.
Yeah.
And I do think it comes with the age of the East Coast, the 13 original colonies, or even just like, to be honest, intellectualism in New York, where most people are pretty educated here, or most people are very cautious, and you grow up around so many different types of people, so you already deal with it, but everybody's also has their own community here, which I think is really cool, but yeah.
That's an interesting point. So I'm from Flushing, born and raised, and I grew up in a very Asian enclave where
Are you from the Korean side or Chinese side, or
okay,
whatever?
so you know about that. Okay, so I grew up in the Korean side, but I had a lot of Chinese friends.
Sure.
Going to dim sum and going to Faida was just as normal to me as like where the local mom and pop was.
Right.
I think that's a very unique aspect of Flushing. But my point is, like, growing up, we also, I don't think, felt the need to talk about it either, because we were all amongst people like us. But I think the difference, what I've noticed, is the idea of like what an Asian American is out here is this is my assumption, because I think we still have like people a lot closer to their ethnic roots here because of the way the immigrant generations came here versus on the West Coast. And just based on what I see you and David talk a lot about, there seems to be a more of a consciousness of what Asian American is. But I don't know if you've noticed that at all.
I think it's funny because California Asians, especially SoCal Asians, you could say, and I've talked about this on the channel, credit them for, or the scene, whether it was like our YouTube scene or just the people that were already there, obviously, like SoCal Asians kind of get credited for pushing like the image of Asian Americans to the rest of the world. Like your image of an Asian American is probably a California Asian. Like if you're in Australia or you're in London,
like a SoCal Asian.
Yeah, it's probably a West Coast Asian.
Okay.
Just because they've also created the most content.
Yeah.
I do think on the West Coast you feel a little bit more free in a way. Like there's so much more Asian dance teams, like boba life, as far as like going deep into like how people base their lives around, I don't want to say base their lives, but like spend so much time at the boba cafes. That's very West Coast. You know, you need the space, you know, you drive everywhere. There's destination points. Obviously the SGV is gigantic, and there's like for miles and miles through many cities, there's a bunch of Chinese businesses, you know. So there's all different types of Asians in SoCal, but I think we can go on and on about the differences, but ultimately just the West Coast and the East Coast are just different.
Yeah. Okay.
Know,
no,
like,
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but it is. I will say this: in the density of New York, the immigrant communities here are definitely more like dense. Like Flushing, you go to Main Street, Roosevelt. That looks like China.
Yes.
More than even Chinatown, because that looks like more like middle class, modern, like China. Like just the Flushing, that crossing was the most busiest intersection during COVID when Times Square was shut down.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And also, here's a fun fact I always throw on people: is like with New York City, out of any single city, has the most Chinese people outside of Asia.
Do you mean by density? Or you mean just
No,
like
just
overall?
pure population.
Really? I actually didn't know that. Okay.
But it's because like Los Angeles, that's not where the Chinese live. It's like they live in Arcadia, Alhambra, Monterey Park, plus Roland Heights, plus Hacienda Heights, plus Temple City, plus if you add those up, maybe the entire SGV is quite populated. But as a single like one city, and New York is a very big city, obviously, with all the boroughs and stuff. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I know you guys are known for your food content, but I want to talk to you guys about the content that you've been lately putting out there regarding. I think these like more honest conversations about the Asian American experience, and
we're just getting straight to it. Like we're trying to like.
Yeah, so that's what our podcast is about. I think we, in a similar vein, want to do the same thing. This podcast was started as a result of all the anti-Asian hate crimes that was happening in 2020. Right. And what we noticed out here was the mainstream media wasn't really talking about this issue from the perspective of, I think, people like us who didn't just see it as a very, like, oh, it's because Trump said China virus. There's more nuance than that.
Yeah, so, having the nuanced conversations, I think that what the news tended to highlight was just like, you know, oh, like it's a result of this.
Right.
They're not really delving in and really breaking down like why Asians have actually always been targets.
Exactly.
Like honestly, like since whenever.
Yeah.
You know, like,
so I want to talk because I feel like you and David have kind of been really unique in that aspect. That I think you guys are one of the few YouTubers that go there with that sort of.
We'll take it there and
honest,
while keeping it somewhat family friendly still and hopefully like our goal is like we still make it at least entertaining enough where like it can bring the conversation to people who are not trying to like read a long dissertation by like some professor, you know, shout out to them and the people who study it, but like we're kind of like that middle point where it's like I've had those conversations, but I'm trying to take that knowledge, package it and like present it in a way where like almost anybody like in this room can like consume it. It's more consumable. So
what was like the reasoning for pivoting in that direction? Because I even remember when my friends started saying like, yo, I feel like the Fung Bros have been pivoting. Like, why are they suddenly becoming serious? Like, it was kind of like, I think, surprising for some people who follow you or have followed you guys for years. So was it like a conscious decision or was it like you guys just wanted to, you'd always wanted to do it? Or
I don't always want to be serious. It's hard. Sometimes I just want to have stupid fun and eat food with pretty girls on camera. That's all.
I mean, you guys are still doing that, right? So it's not, you know.
No, I think it was just. I think me and my brother felt like that there was just a lot more things to say, and no one else was really saying it in the form. I know that now, your podcast, a lot of people are having these conversations. I do think in the short form, bite-sized, shorter episodes. And kind of on a YouTube platform, like already having that platform, building up that platform of a lot of Asian heavy material over the years, I felt like we were in a good place to really talk about it and have a voice. And you know, I don't think we're like the voice. I don't think anybody is the voice, but I do see ourselves as one of the voices. So I think it's, and I felt like, you know, we've thought a lot about it. We've had a ton of conversations. We've seen a lot, analyzed a lot, and we thought, we're we're fit to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like these are the conversations that we have actually like off camera after we're stuffing our faces and like talking about dollar dumplings, go here, new Chinatown opening. Like after that, we're having these convos with like real people like on the street, and, about the community. And it was like, why not we have it, And there are certain things that I don't try to delve too far into if I'm not that deep into. Like I try not to get into the politics of Chinatown. I think those are very complicated. But as far as like how do Asians feel, like I think I can speak on that pretty well.
Yeah. Are there like repercussions for being a content creator with a following as big as yours and talking about these issues? Because I do feel like now it's more acceptable for us to be honest about it. But 3 years ago, you could easily get in trouble for saying things like, Asians are victims of like racism.
I saw some comments because people will have like, we'll say something that some people feel is like too left. And then we'll say something that people feel is too right. And I'm like, guys, we're not like, you can't just
pigeonhole you.
You can't just pigeonhole me. Like, I don't think I fall into one of those silos. Like, and I think that was hard for a lot of people because there was a time like 3 years ago where if you said anything
correct,
I would say left, people were like, oh, you're like, you're a Trumper. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't identify as that. Heck no, But like, I'm like, I think I'm a reasonable person, and like, I think we can have this conversation. So I think the goal over the past 3 years is to have that conversation and show that guys, like, maybe, first of all, Asians are not a monolith, but also maybe we don't fit, like, where do Asian values fall on the political spectrum? Depending on how you look at it, it is technically more conservative. I'm not saying it's more Trump, but like, you can say in a way, traditional Asian values are a little bit more conservative, or that Asians are chill about the social stuff and we don't care. So it's like, like whatever, however you want to, it can be either.
We have our own place in this political narrative because I think the reality is the situation in this country, it's always told from like black versus white.
Yes.
And we are not either.
We don't fit in the black-white
narrative.
Dichotomy.
Yeah, exactly.
We really don't fit in a great place, and people try to slot us in. Oh, you're a minority, so you got to be only on this side, on the minority side. That's fair. That's a good argument. I know we're not white. We don't get treated as white. We don't get the privileges as white. But how come on some?
You could get canceled for saying that, though. 3 years ago, it would have been.
You know what I'm saying? That's why. I by the way, I think the atmosphere right now is a lot more raw.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think it's a lot more raw. I think comedy also, in a way, you could say comedy went a little bit more right, but I think it's just because it swung back into the middle, and when it swings right, it feels like it's becoming more right, but it's actually more just in the middle. And people are being very, very raw right now and just speaking up and talking about things and just saying it how it is, because they're just like, yo, listen at the world, like whether you like whoever's in charge or whatever, you think they're destroying the system, like, can we just be honest?
Yeah. Do you think though, like Asian Americans as a whole, and I know we're not a monolith like you said, but do you think the community is ready though to have these kind of conversations more openly? Because I think it has changed in the last 3 years, especially with Stop Asian Hate. But
it kind of brought the rawness to our community.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think there's still a lot of us who don't see this as something that is really a priority necessarily.
No, I mean, if it was a priority, all of our podcasts and channels would get more views.
Taken off, yeah.
Well, at least would have more. I mean, the population is not huge, but I think a lot of Asians still living their life. I think a lot of Asians had an awakening during the Asian hate stuff. A lot of people who had never thought about it, and like, was men or women, or like, I'd never thought about the sexualization of Asian women, and never dated an Asian guy, and then now I'm like thinking about, I've actually had that conversation multiple times, which is interesting. But unfortunately, tragedy sometimes it breeds, an awakening moment. But yeah, I think a lot of Asians went back to living their life.
Yeah.
And but I think there is change. Like, I think everybody's changed a little bit, but not everybody's changed a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of how it goes, right? Like, you can try to be an alarmist and state what's happening to cause a larger reaction, right? Because you know change is difficult. Or you just take a step by step, and most people moved like one notch into either direction, and had that conversation.
Do you think Asian American content creators who have quote unquote large followings, do you think they have sort of a responsibility to speak up about the things that happen in our community that we don't talk about? And the reason why I ask this is because during like 2020 to 2022, I remember there were people who you could argue maybe leaned a little bit more to the right. And you'd read about it on Reddit and on comments, like getting legitimately upset because people like, I won't drop names, but like people who had large followings weren't speaking up about like hate crimes. They weren't speaking up about the latest injustice that they were seeing on the news. Right. And it seemed like they were expecting that from, people like yourself. What's your view on that?
Dang, that's a really good question. I think not everybody who has a following or had a movie role or had this or that, just because they're Asian, it doesn't mean they care or were part of the Asian community. If they were just smart and wanted to just be strategic, post about it, you know what I mean? Like, it's the fair thing. It was almost like, at some point, the Asian hate crimes were apolitical. It was just like, post it, talk about it, share it. That's it. Like, you don't have to take a stance. Even if you just reposted the story and you left no commentary, and just said, wow, this is terrible, that was the safest route to go if you had a following.
But some people didn't even do that.
So some people didn't even do that. And I was like, if you're actually part of the community, I think you would have, but I think some people showed their true colors. I know a couple people, I noticed that I didn't love the way they responded, and I kind of held it against them for a couple years. Not in like a hateful way, but I was just like, man, they're fine now, whatever. Like, I'm not trying to like hold grudges, but I was just like, because it's not about everybody. Like, it's just kind of like checking in, like almost just like, hey, did you clock in? Like, at least clock in for the Asians. Like, at least, even though you're not working hard. But I don't think everybody had to, but I'm just saying that if you wanted to appear to be part of the community, you would have.
Is there kind of like in the Asian content creator world, like, is there sort of like people know who are sort of the real ones versus those who may not speak up?
You would probably see that conversation on Reddit.
Okay.
But I think within the community, yes, there is kind of a sense of like who's. For example, I think Simu keeps it pretty real.
Yeah,
I think Simu's out there, so shout out to Simu. I know that not everything he says, all people respond the way that maybe he would want or the way that we would want, or maybe not everything, the way he says it is like the way I would say it, but ultimately Simu's down, for example, so you can kind of use him as a bar of a guy who's like kind of pretty popular, had a big movie, but pretty in the community, pretty much in there. So you can kind of just compare other people to them. I mean, I know during that time there was a lot of people of Asian descent somehow who were trying to do something, and I think activism. There is some crossover with opportunism, not necessarily in a negative way, because I think you can still be a net positive and kind of be an opportunist in that sense, because during that time it just needs like coverage, right? But obviously, like, some people may have overplayed their role in it, but that's just also what happens when you have like a storm like that.
I'll ask another, just one more follow-up question on that. We had a guest on the show who is also very involved with just conversations around like Asian masculinity, and I know you and David talk about this topic quite a lot. I mean, this guy, I think he's quite extreme about it. He's kind of got this view about like Asian men are literally the most oppressed group in the country.
I know who you're talking about.
Okay, I'm not, I'm just saying that's his view.
Sure.
But he had really interesting insights around how, because of that, you tend to see the most vocal, outspoken voices about just racism or discrimination from Asian men more than the women, because Asian men, according to him, have an earlier sense of how their race works against them in this country versus women. because they don't have the same ability to like enter white spaces like women?
I mean, I would say there is some truth to it on average. I don't want to say, I mean, there's plenty of outspoken Asian women, so it's never to take away, you know, and plenty of Asian women are very conscious of that. But yeah, if you made me say on average, and I've talked to a lot of Asian people very openly, yeah, probably. Just because, you know, I think that Asian women, and let's preface this, especially if you grow up in a certain maybe socioeconomic class or you look a certain way, your ability to be fluid, and this does go for anybody, even like Asian guys who are tall and good looking, their cultural fluidity is probably better, right? So that means that you will get invites and pulled into different systems at a young age and when you get treated better from those systems, it doesn't occur to you how different you are, right? But yes, men being, to be honest, still the people who fight wars. If you fight a war, it's mostly men, right? So like women are catty with each other, but men kill each other. You know what I mean? Like we die. You stare at me at the bar, you're dying. We're one of us is dying.
Are you saying I scared you?
Yeah.
I think I did actually. We're going into that later.
No, but if I'm drunk, men drunk, we're going to war, right? It's kind of, it's just testosterone.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, whatever. So anyways, but yeah, when I'm saying that, obviously in other men, you can just say whatever type of man, if you want to say white or blah, 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 this type of man runs these systems and runs this country, right? The other threat from this group is going to be the men first, and then the women are non-threatened.
Interesting.
Generally, speaking, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that every Asian woman's life is easy, not saying that at all, obviously, but yes, I mean, I see what he's saying.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'd go and say like Asian men are the most oppressed, just because we have to like unpack what he's like the details of that oppressed package.
Yeah, no,
like there's like a lot of different
like
we're talking about in the dating pool, blah blah blah. That's like that's one level, but then we're talking about like securing jobs and then we rank a little differently in that. So we have to acknowledge that in different sectors and different arenas, we may struggle more than others. But it's not necessarily, I don't think we're like at the bottom of every single aspect of life.
Yeah. No. So in terms of unpacking, you know, I feel like you and David were kind of very early on, you know, the content that you guys were producing in even like the early 2010s. I remember like the first video I watched of the Fung Bros was like the 18 types of Asian girls. And, you know, it was kind of surreal for me to watch something like that because it didn't occur to me, like I was in college at the time, I think, and I don't think I was aware that being Asian American meant that it could be responsible for certain like behavioral traits of mine, if that makes sense. Like it just didn't occur to me that like, oh, she's like this, because she's a girl, but she's also Asian American, so there are things that she likes. There's
maybe specifically Korean too.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
there's obviously cultural traits that a lot of us carry on that are tropes, archetypes, stereotypes, whatever word you want to say, you know.
But at the time, I feel like it was very early on for that kind of very nuanced conversation to be happening.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like for you and David, did it, like to be that nuanced, to be that intellectually honest, like was that the result of a lot of conversations you guys were having? Was it stuff you guys were talking about with each other, or like? Yeah. Because that takes a certain way of thinking to be able to get to that.
Yeah. No, a lot of people. Some people took what we were doing as offensive. Some people said, "Oh, you're just telling the non-Asian guys, the white guys who like Asian girls about Asian girls." I have heard some stories of non-Asian dudes using that video in a creep. You know, I don't know how people that wasn't for them.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But I don't fully control who watches it either, and it has had millions of views. So, you know, sorry if some girls got someone said something weird to them, you know, based off that video. That was not my intention for sure, 100%. It was more for Asian guys to understand even Asians, like or Asian women to understand parts of themselves. Not saying it was 100% accurate, of course, but. You know, I thought giving 18 types was pretty generous at that time.
Yeah.
Like, but a lot of people were like, oh, I know there's 3 types.
Yeah. But to do the work of even breaking that down and like, you know, I'm using it as an example because
you're saying where does that come from? Where does that
come
from? Analytical brain and wanting to do it?
Yeah.
Growing up in our household and in the area that I was in, I'm going to use this analogy, and I'm not comparing myself to them.
Okay.
In a way, but a similar, like, if you grow up in like if you're like a fish out of water, or you're different than other people in your environment, but you come from like an educated family, I do think that you end up thinking about yourself a lot. Like Dave Chappelle has two parents who are really educated, but he grew up like adjacent to the hood, but not really in the hood. And then, like a lot of comedians, a lot of famous comedians come from like families where their parents were teachers, where it's like you kind of are, you grow up with an analytical brain, and it's a little nerdy to do that, to be honest, and just analyzing things and like how we were different. Like, growing up, it's funny because I did have good Asian friends growing up, but it was mostly Vietnamese, Filipino, and Cambodian friends. So I'm like the only Chinese kid.
Okay.
Like I'm the chinky Asian. No, I'm serious. Like when I meet, I meet all different types of Asians. And when I meet certain Asians, they're like, oh, you're an Asian. Like I'm Asian, but you're an Asian. I'm like, yes, I am Asian. Like based off the face. Like I have, the smaller eyes. I have like, and they're like, yeah. So I always knew that we were even different amongst the Asians that we were around. I didn't grow up just around Chinese people, just around East Asian people, just around Asian people, just around even Southeast Asians, So also I do think it lends it because we were competitive at a young age and always competing. Like I'll be honest, like we were competing against people our entire lives. Like we never stood back and played the cut as Asian kids in no matter what circles we were in. We were always out there doing stuff, whether it was playing sports, football, basketball, competing in track. I'm out there at the high school competitions and doing talent shows and giving presentations. David was pretty good at debate. I'm taking leadership roles in high school early on when the school's not that Asian, and not that super diverse. So we're just out there, like we faced a lot of like small adversity here and like a lot all the way. But just like competition. So to me, when you are a different type of person competing in all these different arenas, obviously you start thinking about how you're different. And hey, that works for them, but it don't work for me. Or how come I'm like this? Or my family's like this. My family's different than this. And I have to admit, like my parents are educated. We didn't grow up in a super nice area, but like they're educated. So growing up in that area with educated parents, now you have this like blend of like perspective and like thinking.
Do you ever feel like it can be a little bit of a burden to look at a lot of situations as like, this is happening to me because I'm Asian and I'm an Asian male? Or do you now lean into it and embrace like, you know what, it's okay to like say that it's because I'm an Asian male, this is a reality. But at times it's like, why do I even have to worry about this?
I mean, and it probably varies on how strong you think you are or the tools that you have in your toolkit. It's kind of like looking at a job, like you're like a construction worker. You have this bag of tools that you're either born with or that you've acquired over a time of training and skill set that you've gotten. And then someone gives you this job, but then the job, like it gets delayed, or like it's a snow day, or like, that wood frame on the barn that you're building breaks, and then you're facing this adversity. But obviously, like if you have the skills and the tools, then you're more confident, right? Yeah. Versus like if you walk up there, you're not that well trained and you don't have the toolkit, then, or you don't know if you have it, then you're probably looking at that job and then the rickety frame and you're like, oh man, I'm done, I'm finished. So I think, it weighs on everybody differently, man. I mean, there was times when for sure, like it hurt our confidence and we felt bad, and sometimes I wish I was like one of those Asians in 626 who grew up with knowing nothing else but just like, being Asian means I'm free, I'm just like anybody else. And then those kids go to college in Boston and then realize that they're Asian, but there was a beauty of that. So I want to say that there's like a beauty of growing up in those communities and just being yourself and not having to think about it. There's also, it comes with an ignorance for sure. And maybe, you're not used to operating around different types of people and being able to, jump worlds and be a social butterfly or whatever, but I feel like I want to say we've been through a lot of training, you know, and we've never fully, until New York, I'll be honest, I never felt like I was really deep within part of a community, like a physical community.
Okay.
Because even in LA, we were like, a
'Cause
lot
too
of our
spread
guys
out,
we were
right,
working
yeah.
with were like, you know, I had some friends in the 626, but I wasn't really part of the natural community. A lot of people were, they have their groups that they grew up with. And LA can kind of be a little bit of a cliquey place. And maybe the
that,
part of, I'll give them some credit. Part of it maybe is the point in life that we were at, you know, but coming to New York and vibing with people and like, you know, I feel like I'm somewhat part of Chinatown, but I'm not beholden to Chinatown either, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know, like, you know, knowing some good local friends out here. So I don't know what the question was, but that's where
No,
it went.
no. It's good. So the conversations that you and David tend to have on YouTube about these topics, do you feel that you've kind of encouraged other Asian Americans to also be similarly like very, very like maybe more nuanced in their way of thinking too? Like, do you notice that at all?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Okay.
I think some people have, and I see the comments sometimes, and you know, sometimes when, you know, as much as I love the food videos, when someone comes up to me, he's like, "Yo, I've been watching the Hot Pot Boys. You could keep on talking, man. I love the conversations." That comment, I love.
Okay.
Like, I love it because I don't make the food. Other people are making the food.
Yeah.
I'm just highlighting. So on one side of the content, we're highlighting stuff that's fun in general, food, everybody needs to eat, it's great, you know. But on the one other side, like, if you take away from our conversation on how to have that conversation, I always say at the end of the video, I'm like, oh, hopefully, like, you know, at least we said something that helps you have this conversation. Like, or show this video to a friend that you want to have this conversation with. Hopefully ours was a accessible version.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to approach it, you know, or you're scared or something, just text it to him. Hey, watch this. What do you think about this video? Just slip it in there versus you having to bear the microphone of being the MC of that. You know?
So there's a real intentionality then with how you shoot the videos, is to kind of help.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Half intention for sure. I think about it.
Yeah.
I would say.
Shifting gears just a little bit, in terms of the future of like Asian American content creators, and you and people like Wong Fu Productions, Kev Jumba, Ryan Higa, you guys came up at an era where YouTube was starting to really take off with the whole.
It was kind of the only
space.
platform you could see Asians on.
Right. And now it's, you know, Asian influencers are kind of everywhere. I mean, TikTok, I think, is no.
Yes, once you get into the algorithm, you'll see a bunch of Asian faces.
Yeah.
And also from Asia and other places.
Sure.
Australia.
Yeah. I actually, that's funny you mentioned that, because I've been getting a lot of recommendations for like Korean food content, like people who make food, but they're from Korea, and so they have like large followings just from cooking Korean food. But
Wait, you said you're a Korean girl who's getting Korean food recommendations?
No, I mean,
so weird.
No, from Korea though. I don't really search for stuff in Korean, but it's like in Korean language, which I find a little bit interesting, you know, because
I think a lot of people are watching in language stuff. There's also those automatic translation captions.
Yeah, there are.
That are crazy now.
Yeah.
Dude, it's weird. The world is like, it's like world content now.
Yeah. So on top of that, do you think it's harder for, if an Asian American wanted to be a content creator now, do you think it's harder for them to come up in the way that you did because of how saturated it is? And two, like, where do you see the future of that space going for Asian Americans?
I mean, I think it's easier to create content than ever.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody has to aim for YouTube. I think a lot of people, they ask me, they're like, hey, I just started a YouTube channel, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what is it about? What's your goal? And then I'm like, well, depending on your goals, just do it on Instagram. You're gonna get a little bit, it's easier to find. It forces you to make shorter videos. Well, now you can do long ones too, but like it forces you to kind of make more like, you know, hook-based like content and you know.
A clickbait.
A little bit, or have a good hook. And you know, I'm not like a guru at YouTube either though. Like I could probably improve.
Really?
I'm not like amazing. I just feel like, you know, we've been at it so long and we have a brand, and I could probably do a better job of like hacking the system and like making sure my thumbnail and the title and then the first 20 seconds is a certain way. It could be a little tighter for sure, but Yeah. I don't want to say we're grandfathered in because we can always fall off and people will always, as you've seen, our views are not where they were 6 years ago, for sure, you know, because I'm competing with so much more now.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe I need to step it up too.
Do you see the future for you guys kind of getting off social media eventually and becoming more established?
I think more established. I don't know what that means.
Well, I guess like being maybe part of like mainstream media establishments. I don't know if, I know you guys have previously done
I think
some
we're,
stints.
I think all that stuff is like pretty much not on my mind anymore. I think social media is always there. You can always do it. Like even if it's not the main thing, you can always do it. So to me, it's not ever about like, am I not doing YouTube? I'm like, how am I gonna do YouTube?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, I see. Okay. I'm gonna shift gears back to what we're talking about in terms of talking about some of these like harder conversations around Asian hate, discrimination, racism. Being part of more of like the online content creator community, to me, there sometimes seems to be a gap between like what the online discourse is around these issues and then what people are doing like on the ground. Do you have any thoughts on like why that gap exists?
Could you give me a maybe not hyper specific example though?
What do you
like
mean?
of what you're talking about, of what you see a creator do or in the comment section?
Actually, that's a good distinction. I'll say
because the comment section is a little different than the creators.
That's a good point. I'll say comment section then.
Oh yeah, the comment section is just, dude.
Or even on Reddit threads.
Activism change does not happen from the comment section. It does not. There can be some funny comments, some insightful stuff. You never know if the information's true or not, whatever, you know. So I'm not saying it's pointless, but I do say like the comment section is like can easily fuel it unproductively.
Okay.
Very easily. With that said, you need comments for engagement and you want people to watch it and you want to make engaging content.
Like you could clearly see there are people who are, let's say, like upset that if, you know, like an Asian elderly person gets like beaten up and it's not prosecuted, like the person's still not caught. There's like still anger, there's like a reaction to it, but the reaction from the community in terms of organizing about it, protesting about it, or coming out to do something about it, like that is still.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fatigue too. You know, like you can't protest every day for years straight. You got to go to work and live your life. And I think, for example, like the attacks on elderly, random Asian attacks have peaked. Not to say they've gone away, but they've peaked for sure. Like almost anybody you talk to, you'd say like.
Peaked in terms of coverage, or you mean?
No, just peaked probably as an
actual problem.
Yeah. I mean, I just think everything was fueled by the anti-China stuff. It was the peak of COVID. A lot of people were on the loose. There's a lot of mentally ill people. There's a little bit less mentally ill people now. So I think like it definitely peaked. Not saying that it's gone to zero, right? But, and I do think like coverage-wise, I mean, to be honest, that stuff it won't always get cut. I think the more cut and dry the cases, like, oh, mentally ill person attacks old Asian elder, that's like a no-brainer, like everybody's gonna post that. But when it gets more complicated into like the cases of like, this person did this, it led to this, and then this was like, you know what I mean? Like there's just more complicated cases. I think those things, some people tune out of or they don't know how to react because it requires more brain power to research into it to then figure out a real thought out opinion versus like, old Asian lady got punched. Of course, that's a no-brainer, that's terrible, you know? But some of the other stuff is just, I guess, more nuanced. So it just kind of like maybe turns people off.
But do you think that that's more like kind of I don't want to say it's a problem, but like for a lot of Asian Americans, because we just culturally don't speak out or like really get incensed to that kind of immediate action.
Do you feel like
I think
there should constantly be
not
a bigger reaction to stuff?
Well, just a reaction, right? Like a reaction. Because I think...
and you don't think there's always a reaction?
No, I don't. And I can't tell if it's because people just don't know about it or they just don't care to speak up about it. I think it's maybe a little bit of both. But what I have noticed when I talk to Asian American friends is that if there is like an incident that gets posted and an Asian person was a victim, I noticed like 80% of the questions are like, well, was it really because he was Asian? There's like a sense of like, let's check ourselves before we make it about
jump
like,
to
race.
conclusions.
Yeah,
right?
and I say to them like, I appreciate the need to validate that, but sometimes I'm just like, you could just be mad because an Asian person got attacked, and you can be mad that they're not treating this case like with the same amount of urgency as other cases, right? Like that's enough grounds
Like
for
so, like some, I guess you're saying like maybe it feels like a lot of people only want to react off a clear hate crime.
a clear hate crime, or when it feels safe enough to, because maybe like, you know, the media blasts it more or something. Or,
Right. Well,
yeah.
if the news is blasting about it, then you feel, more people are going to feel comfortable
Right,
posting about
right,
it.
right.
Versus like, not everybody wants to stick their neck out on every single case.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is like, I feel like it happens especially within our community to want to be incredibly like safe before we do.
I think that what you're seeing is that Asians regress to the mean. A little bit.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, there was a change made, and more people will still speak up forever. But it's not, it like went this way and then it kind of retracted back. But it still started from here. So let's say it's shot here, everybody's angry, blah, blah, blah. I got to talk, post it. And then, but like slowly over time, people's fatigue and like, they're just like, maybe I don't want to make everything a big deal already. But so it kind of goes back to here. But I think that Asians have already taken much, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's how I view it. But I think that it's like the Knicks. The Knicks make you think they could go to the finals. Oftentimes they regress to the mean.
Yeah. Gary appreciates that comment. Big Knicks fan. Over there. So I watched an episode of you and David on the Lucky Boys podcast. And David had said something on that episode where he talked about how the average Asian guy is kind of at like a baseline disparity compared to, I hope I'm remembering it correctly, but like the idea is that when we talk about emasculation against Asian men, it's like the average Asian guy is kind of, there's a bigger disparity between an average looking Asian guy versus an average looking like white guy. And I kind of have some thoughts on like how that even affects like Asian women. Like my view is that, you know what a boba liberal is, right? Like the term boba liberal?
I mean, whatever, I guess what people define as the term is slightly different, but essentially, I think I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
We all get it. Yeah.
So the context like for that, why I bring that up, is that there's been dialogue around like why so many boba liberals tend to be women, Asian women. You know, I'm certainly not a boba liberal, but I sometimes can empathize with maybe some of the personal experiences that Asian women may go through at a level of either like romantic rejection or experiences from other Asian men where, you know, maybe in some way that kind of influences the views they end up having about Asian men, or, you know, towards like, like the, you know, the things that you hear, like, oh, Asian women who hate on Asian guys and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I wanted to just bring that up because I think that's a very nuanced when it comes to the genders between the two. And you guys have talked a lot about it from the male perspective. So I was curious, like, what you would say on the other side.
I guess, like, so are we on the premise that whatever we had said or what David had said about the average Asian guy getting the most subtracted?
Yeah.
Where it's like maybe our top tier guys, our top 4 or 5% tall, good looking, whatever, they're doing pretty good.
Right.
Like they're enjoying themselves.
Right.
They still may face some of the same dynamics of being underrated and overlooked in their own way, but they're at a different tier.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I have like good looking 6-foot Asian guy friends, you know, like, but they still are aware that there's
like a privilege.
Yeah. But also aware that they still experience their version, but it's just at a higher tier. It's like Kevin Kreider had talked about it. He's the Korean adopted model, where he was like, yo, I was an ugly model. He's like a model, for sure. He's in the tier of model, so that's like above the average guy, but he was still getting treated and getting fractionated on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you get there, your exchange rate still, it's like the exchange rate is still below 1 to 1, but you just have so much more money, so it doesn't matter as much. I guess if you want to like that analogy. Now, if we're talking about average Asian guy, do I think that the average Asian guy is getting hit the most and probably suffers the most? Because obviously, like, we're seeing good-looking Asian guys out in media all the time. Like, they're doing fine. The faces out there, and like, you know, a lot more non-Asian women are open to, particularly good-looking Asian guys, right? But yeah, the average
Yeah.
Asian guy. And then what, comparing that to the
average Asian girl. Yeah, because
where-
like, just to be real, like I feel like even, you know, for me in like high school, going to school with, I went to high school with a lot of Asian kids, right? There was definitely like this physical ideal of an Asian girl that
there started to be Asian standards there at that school.
there always was, at least for me
Right,
growing
right,
up,
right.
where, you know, she's like petite, she's got straight hair, she's like.
I'm assuming you were taller than a lot of guys back then.
I was tall. I was
Right.
I was a late bloomer, and I
Okay.
think a lot of us are, to be honest. I
Okay.
think a lot of us are late bloomers, but
I think
like,
it applies to Asian guys too.
Okay,
Asian
yeah,
women
yeah,
too.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Asians in general.
but there's definitely like a crop of them in that high school
Sure.
era who like have no problems getting dates from like anybody.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
as a woman, like I knew that was what I was up against, so to
So
speak.
you're saying you know what it feels like to be an average Asian guy?
Yeah, I'll admit it. I don't know. I have no problem with that. I know where I stand in it. But you know, as a result of that, the things that I started hearing were like, yeah, you're too tall for Asian men. Like you're too this for Asian men. You're too this.
Yeah.
And
No, there's some of that.
so
yeah.
there's like so that's what I'm saying.
I
And
agree.
we don't talk about that as much as I feel like we hear about.
Oh, you want the average Asian girl to be seen. You're like, yo,
Yeah.
see our struggle.
Yeah.
No, and that's fair. I
Yeah.
think you bring up a good point. And I think it's easy to focus on the male thing. Also, because like, if males are often a lot of the voice of this, it is harder for us to always talk about the Asian female side without having an Asian female there. I can guess.
Yeah.
And like I from who I've talked to and stuff, like talking to you or talking to other people, like I can see what you're saying, of course, but like I don't always want to speak on it. But I do try to include like, hey, this also might apply to Asian women too, but I'm talking about the guys.
Yeah,
But I think more conversations are about guys, right? In the Asian emasculation and stuff like that, average Asian. Well, what I would say, and I think, and it's not about the suppression Olympics, oh, average Asian guy has it worse than the average Asian girl. But I will say this, I think the average Asian girl in America still generally has her femininity, which is considered attractive as a female. And I think the average Asian guy, it's, a lot of people are not sure if they're granted their masculinity as a male.
because of
and-
media representation.
Yeah,
or
I
just-
think media and you know, I don't know what we consider, like we'd almost have to pop up a picture of an average like Chinese American girl and the average Chinese American guy and see, and then examine like, okay, what's the issue? Is the girl now, the girls grows up in a society where women, it's much more like essentially black pill for women from the get-go, where you learn that your looks are going to impact your life in certain ways, but it becomes part of just being a woman at this point of like, hey, makeup, like the hair, make sure your hair is long, and yeah, the guys like this, right? Those are like, in a way, conversations that women have earlier on. But now guys don't always have those conversations, so a lot of guys don't try and know nothing about that. Right? Not saying they should do makeup, but a lot of guys have not thought about their haircut. They have not
see.
thought about even
Like
putting
working out, like-
working out. They have not thought about. They're just doing. They're on the path of least resistance, and depending on how you're raised or who you're around, it's going to lead you to a path of not acquiring any of those tools.
Yeah, and
You know.
especially for Asian men too, there's probably the added layer of like
Right.
being pressured to like do well in school,
Right.
don't, you know, or like always focus on your
Exactly.
studies.
Yeah, there's a
not
lot of
be-
other things, and like,
Yeah.
okay, well, you're a guy, so you gotta be super smart. I mean, but Asian women are pushed too to be smart too.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I guess what I mean is like, it's messed up, and it's unfortunate that women have to think about looks so early on. But at least I guess the silver lining is that it becomes part of your life, and so it becomes more regular and just something a part of being a woman.
I see.
Versus a lot of guys, they don't think about. A lot of Asian guys are not taught and trained to be like, think about what's cool or what's bold or how do you talk to people, how do you, you know, and then I don't want to blame it on gaming, but like, for example, gaming, I think there's a lot of Asian dudes who are very capable and attractive that do game and whatever, but also it's a path of least resistance where you end up going in that and then you're not thinking about other things.
Is there a temptation to like try to like when you try to promote like healthier ideals of Asian masculinity? Maybe healthier is not the right word, but I feel like you and David are very vocal about like trying to.
We're not afraid to say like, yeah, work out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I was gonna say.
Easy.
Yeah.
Simple.
Like promoting, like I guess a more, like more how to like self-improve.
Yeah.
For Asian guys.
Yeah.
Is there ever a temptation to try to not, like align with like white-centric standards as to what that looks like? Or is it, do you
I don't even think it's all white-centric standards. I mean,
well, you know what I mean?
The thing is, what I would say, I see what you're saying. And, listen, if being bold and confident and physically fit and having trained even a martial arts for 1 year of your life, if that's white-centric or Western-centric, then I guess they just define masculinity.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Well, you can look at ancient Asia, like, which is pretty different from the West. They really have very little influence from the West until like 100 some years ago, really, like major influence, where it's like, they still had soldiers. I mean, you want to look at Japanese culture, samurai, they were pretty stoic, hyper patriarchal, very strong, great at poetry, good at the sword. It was pretty lit to be a samurai. But yeah, and then, you know, honor, you did kill yourself if you messed up, you know, and shameful. So I think these ideas of, there is, I feel like, some basic global masculinity. I mean, yeah, just physically fit. It's good for your mental too. It's good for endorphin release, dopamine. Stay confident. I mean, martial arts comes from Asia, from the East. So, you know, I don't think that telling people to train that is a Western way of thinking. I just think we can agree. I think that there's base level, like, masculinity,
That's
like
not
however much you want to, like, talk a certain way or blah blah blah, but it's like, you live in the West. What are you operating America? Leave America if you don't want to. You know, no, I'm saying like, I don't want to say it like that, but I'm saying, like, if you just so you know, there are ways of doing things that are successful in this society. So if you actively choose to not do those things and you're here, then just so you know,
you're gonna be left
behind. You're not fit. You're gonna make it a little harder on yourself later on. That's just the game that we play in the West. So then, if you want to play a different game, then go back and move back. You can go back as an expat and whatever, you know, and not have to feel so under that pressure, you know?
I mean, the reason why I bring this up is because in one of our previous episodes, the person I mentioned earlier who had the very extreme views, we talked exactly about that because in his mind, he thinks that it's purely because of media representation of how Asian males are portrayed, that Asian women don't go for Asian men. And I told him, like, I know girlfriends who are Asian, only date Asian men, but we also have some complaints. If that makes sense. Which, you know, it's not just to
everybody has complaints.
And our view is that maybe it wasn't expected for men to behave a certain way back in the homeland because of, you know, more rigid gender roles and whatnot. But coming here now, when you have maybe more of like a chivalrous sort of culture on how relationships should be, I don't know if Asian people are always like raised with that sort of mentality, and you know, you can't blame women for expecting that, so to speak.
My general feeling is, for me, my view is that media definitely plays a role, for sure, about how you grow up and the images you have. If you can see this guy as a romantic lead in your heart or in your mind movie, then that helps a lot. And now we're starting to see Asian guys as a bunch of romantic leads because a lot of people are consuming other types of material. Now, with that said, I understand I'm in media. Media impacts, for sure. But is it the biggest thing even? I'm not sure. I think a lot of Asian dudes in America were not raised, and it's not fully our fault. It was just a kind of a bad, it was a little bit of a tough situation where if your parents are not able to raise you because they're immigrants, like, to adapt to the American style, and you're not getting all that coaching and those repetitions early on, then you end up growing up and you're behind unless you're forced into it or you put some effort into it. You know what I mean? And so I think that's another large factor. I do think, as far as like Asian women not dating, Asian guys are not marrying, I mean, first of all, I think it's changing in the sense that I don't know if the percentage of Asian women are more marrying Asian guys now, or just Asian guys have more options. Because there used to be a time where it almost felt like if the Asian women didn't want to marry the Asian dude, he was asked out, and then he had to, like, maybe go back to Asia or whatever, right?
Yeah, which is a thing.
Which is always an option, which I have to know, but I have to also admit that is somewhat of a strength that Asians always had. You know, like, to be honest, I mean, the whole idea of like maybe going back to Africa to find a wife was not as popular, a common thing, but a lot of guys have always gone to Asia to find a wife, whether they were Asian or not. But what I think is that basically that whole thing about Asian women not dating Asian, I think I've made like 50 videos like addressing it.
You made a lot of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and media is part of it, but I just can't blame media, man.
Yeah.
It's like
That's fair,
that Chris Rock joke. Media, Chris. It's the media, Chris. Well, you know the joke. I don't need to say it, but like he makes a point where it's like, yeah, the media is one thing, but what about real life? Real life was always more influential. Now, I think media, again, I think that I think people are swayed by media. And when not given proper chances in real life, so let's say you're an Asian girl growing up in a not so Asian area, and obviously at that time consuming that media, then it's not really on the top of your mind.
Yeah.
You know, even if you have nothing against Asian guys, you're just not thinking. I've met Asian girls who tell me they're like, I never turned down any Asian guys, but no Asian guys approached me.
Yeah.
So I just ended up dating who I dated.
Yeah.
And I talked about this on one of our episodes recently where I was like, I'm hearing that more and more. And I'm just taking it at face value and assuming that they're telling me the truth, where it's like, they've been open to it, but it's never came to them.
Yeah.
And maybe it's their attitude or the circles they're in, their friends are in. Maybe Asian guys see them as like, oh, they're whitewashed. They don't even like us anyway, so I'm not gonna approach them. But that's literally some of it as well. But now if you just...
It's more complicated.
It's more complicated than just the media. I don't because then you put the oneness on the media and then you take off responsibility. But if Asian values are about pull yourself up from the bootstraps, and we don't need we're not, it's on us, just like the immigrant struggle is like you come here and you just build it up. Maybe using the community too, but then we have to have that same mindset for this struggle.
Right.
I don't feel like you can be like, oh, Asians, our parents came here with $50 in their pocket, then they made it, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden be like, yeah, but the media kept me from living the life that I wanted. The media shrunk my dick. The media made me not want to work out. The media made... I'm like, okay, at some point we have to carry over the same mindset of like how we get through struggles.
Right. No, that's fair. That's very fair.
Media has impact though. 100%. I'm not saying that that's not impacting us.
Got it. No, that's fair. That's fair. Just a few more questions. One last question, I guess, about the Asian American experience. As a Chinese American, do you feel that, especially with the rhetoric about China at the moment politically, from as Americans, right? Someone pointed this out to me recently, how there's like a difference between like different ethnic groups in terms of how they're embraced by Americans. So like Korean culture, Korean Americans, Korean anything. There's like a more positive perception.
I would agree.
And versus Chinese.
Japanese too is more positive,
But it's interesting because in my opinion, to be part of anything quote unquote Asian American, like Asian American history, Asian American experience, anything about that, you have to know about Chinese American history and experience, because that's the largest Asian racial group in this country, and a lot of like the
largest Asian group in the
world. Oh yeah, that's right.
Two.
So, do you think that in the future, do you think being a Chinese American, there's going to be kind of an interesting like conflict there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the next foreseeable future, it could be 10, 15 years, I think, this anti-China stuff has been brewing for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I was in 8th grade social studies class, and my teacher, he was in the National Guard Reserve. He was in the military, and he was teaching. He's a super nice guy, Mr. Doherty. He's now the head of the National Guard in Washington entirely. But he was like, this was right when Afghanistan popped off, and then some kid was like, hey, like, what's the next country that you think we'll go to war with? This is my first time hearing it. And then he gives an honest answer, because he's in the military. He's like, yeah, probably be China. And I was like, what? I didn't hear about this. Like, when did this happen? Like, China, what? Like, this is when I was like in 7th, 8th grade. But then you realize that actually America had been thinking about this for a while. There's been tension for a while, low key. So are we going to war with China? I think we've been at war. like we're in the Cold War right now. Like it's ongoing.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not the war that people think. You know, I think both sides are not stupid enough to actually start firing missiles at each other. That would be terrible.
If it does get worse, right? Do you feel that being, you know, Chinese American, there could be like a conflict of interest in terms of like how much you may, let's say, accept what the media is reporting about China?
Yeah, for sure.
Because what we consume here is all Western media.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know, if I was reading in the news every day about how the U.S. was saying all these scathing things about South Korea, I would have a problem with it, you know, because I would immediately be like, you're not looking at it from the perspective.
Well, you also have that hot K-rage in you, so that's why Koreans are much
Fair point.
boil much hotter.
Fair point. Fair point. But,
you got a little bit of
know,
that Mongolic blood, so you're like.
No, that's true. Yeah. But the point is like, I don't know what that's like to see my home country sort of not on good terms with China.
Yeah. So I think there's different levels of Asian Americans who connect with China. I mean, listen, China is big, and when you talk about the word Chinese, it means a lot of different things. When you say Korean, obviously we're all assuming South Korea, and we're assuming something fun, like a K-dog or a Korean barbecue or K-pop, something K. Like you guys, the Koreans did amazing with the branding, man. They're killing it, you know. Chinese has just been around. We're the kind of the default Asian. We're the mother Asian, to be honest, of like a lot of East Asian culture that trickles down to everywhere in the world. And so the word Chinese, I was like kind of having this talk with a friend of mine of like, is there another word that we can say that's like referring to Chinese culture that doesn't have to say the word China in it, because China's so politicized. That's still a legit word, like Huaren. It's like kind of like it kind of refers to the group of people, or like Han people, I guess, but then you're getting into ethnic groups or whatever. But I think that, yes, Chinese Americans lean probably less fervently hate China. I do think the Chinese anti-China rhetoric, I feel like, has cooled down since COVID obviously was pretty bad, you know? And now it's just kind of commonplace to just say like, yeah, China's competing with America, or China's AI is now beating America, you know? I feel like there is a small shift on the internet of like, especially with the whole TikTok and then people moving to Red Note, Xiaohongshu, and then like kind of, now with the DeepSeek and the AI thing, that some people are starting to be like, is China really that bad? Are they really evil, or are they just competitive with the West? You know, there's this like, man, I will repeat this one comment that someone said on one of our videos, and it was pretty good, so I'll repeat it. But it was like, Japan made people love their culture. Okay. Korea made people love Asian guys. And China is the only country that doesn't have to listen to America.
That's fair. That's actually pretty fair.
And it kind of like goes to talk, it's just like kind of a funny quote about like soft power versus hard power. Where China's soft power, it's increasing, but it's also battling a lot of like bad PR. Or I would just say like, you see there's a weird food videos where they're eating like all these crazy recipes, you know, in China, like turtles and stuff. And then that's kind of weird. Or like, obviously the whole competition aspect, are we gonna go to war with China about Taiwan and all this stuff? And so it is complicated, but I think overall what I try to do on the channel is like have people like I think it's very clear we're still proud of being Chinese, and I'm also American. Like I've told people like, listen, I'm still American. Like I'm living, if you made me pick where to live for the rest of my life, here. Yeah. So if I had to get drafted and fight, not that I would want to, but just don't make me send me over there to shoot Chinese people, you know what I mean? Keep me back here. You know, if I had to get drafted, like I am still American, but I'm very empathetic, and, you know, I don't think like China's out there for like world domination and to be evil and stuff like that. They're they're just like, yo man, I just don't want to listen to you guys anymore. Yeah. They're like, guys, we're sick of you. We can do it on our own. Yeah. And you guys like bug us, and you guys are all meddling with everybody else in the world. They're like, yo, I've always worried about myself, and now we don't need you, and we got our own thing going on. And that's really it. Yeah. But it's gonna throw off the world order a little bit, so I don't know.
It's the mindset of a country also that's never been colonized by the West.
Not fully,
Not fully, at least. So
I mean, they've been helped by the West, for sure, but as far as like the West has also obviously done a lot of stuff around the world and made a lot of enemies and made it very difficult and ruled the world. But obviously, you know, anyways, I'm not like a fucking Jeffrey Sachs on this. I'm not, but I generally like am on the anti-hate China thing. As in, I don't think you need to hate China, and hating that is not, it's not helpful.
It's not helpful, We'll wrap up by, I just want to bring up your comedy show real quick. So you host is it monthly or?
I put it on pause a little bit because I'm busy with SMALA sauce, my chili oil.
Yeah, where's the bottle? I thought you were gonna bring one today.
Yeah, we're kind of sold out, my bad. I should have brought one. I have one more left, but
I have tried it.
Check it out, smalasauce.com. It's coming back and it's going well. It's got a little momentum and it is a Chinese American product for sure. That's how I describe it. But yeah, so comedy I'm still doing though, and every so often, you know, whenever I can. But it's really fun.
I wanted to ask just a question about that. Is there like a brand of Asian American humor that you think exists that is unique in and of itself? And if it is, like, what would you say are some of the characteristics of that?
I think the Asian American humor, if I had to say what was the style of it, I think it exists more in meme pages than in stand-up comedy. I think stand-up comedy generally does take after the Western, you know, kind of like American style or European style of stand-up comedy. You know, sarcasm, you know, the formulas of writing jokes is, you know, kind of very old. So I don't know if like, I mean, there's Asian topics and Asian jokes.
Sure.
But it's not that different to me than like how I grew up watching a lot of like black comics like Def Comedy Jam, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, those guys. And then you look at Russell Peters who, you know, his style of comedy came in there. So it wasn't so much the style, I guess it's just the topics.
Topics?
Yeah, I choose to make a lot of Asian jokes because that's, again, what I'm passionate about, obviously, you know, although I can make all types of jokes, but it's also like, you can get an Asian crowd for comedy now, you know, which is cool. And that wants to hear predominantly jokes about their culture because I think it hasn't been joked about enough. And it does deserve attention, deserves some scrutiny, deserves analysis. So I don't know if there's a particular Asian American breed, but I would say the memes tend to be even hyper deep cut. Because those can, once you put out a meme, like a POV, like you're, like like if you're Viet, or it might be like a joke about fish sauce, like it'd be hard to make an entire like stand-up comedy career based around like talking about fish sauce, but you can make one meme on TikTok or Instagram that gets spread because it's only gonna get spread to the people who understand it.
Yeah, I see.
So, maybe not a Asian American style,
I someone once said to me that Asian Americans, like, especially among like Korean Americans, like I have like guy friends who their way of like connecting with me is like just making fun of me. You know,
ribbing
it's like it's just ribbing. And I never thought of that as like an inherently Korean American thing or Asian American thing. But I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, my white friends don't really do that as much. I don't think. It's not the same. So it kind of got me thinking about like even how we appreciate
ribbing
jokes,
on you, I guess,
you know?
depends on what they're ribbing about. I mean, I feel like playing the dozens or just kind of cracking on each other is part of many, many cultures because it just shows humor and camaraderie. I mean, maybe they see you as another bro, you know what I mean? And then your Asian, your white friends are like, Hannah's the Asian girl, we have to be sensitive about this. And then your Korean guy friends are just like, oh.
That's fair, that's fair.
Oh, Hannah, you're so silly.
Oh my God, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, actually.
Oh, you gonna go to K-Town, try to meet some guys? We help you, we man. That's my Korean guy impression. So I don't know. No, ribbing is not, I wouldn't say that's necessarily Asian. I would say Asians generally don't rib each other. Like, for them, if you're very Asian, like if you're from Asia.
Oh, I see what you mean, like the
way you make fun of each other is different. So I would say the Asian comedy definitely comes. You would have to look at Asia. You'd have to look at like the Chinese stand-up shows that are happening in language, and see that the joke craft is maybe not exactly like the West, and like the joke like humor, right? Like America, the West is very sarcastic, very go hard, say like the most craziest thing, the ridiculousness, you know.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Last question. What's next for the Fung Bros or for you individually? Anything you'd want your listeners to know about projects or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, just follow Fung Bros on Instagram. Andrew J. Fung, David B. Fung.
SMALA sauce?
Yeah, SMALA sauce.
Yeah.
I think we're also in a time of evolving, you know, and how we do things, and things will look a little bit different. David will spend more time, like we're gonna spend a little bit more time apart, which is fine, you know, we're all growing up and need to live our lives. So I think there's some maturity in that. But yeah, I mean, those are the projects. Any project that I have, you'll probably hear about it either on YouTube or through my Instagram.
Got it.
So stay up, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be on the lookout.
But yes, still going, strong, many years in the game.
Yeah. Definitely grandfathered in, I would say. In a good way.
I don't know. I don't want to feel comfortable and be like, oh, I'm grandfathered in. That's like, I'm not locked into anything.
Yeah,
I can lose attention at any moment, you know? So maybe grandfather needs to step it up. Maybe I need to go a little harder. We need to bring it back, maybe, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, but
yeah. Well, Andrew, really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for doing your part in, just even furthering these conversations out there. It's definitely a blueprint for even people like myself to feel a little bit encouraged to do that. So,
yeah, and you know what? If we were one of the inspirations for you, that's a huge compliment. Because I always wondered it for years. I was like, is there gonna be another like Fung Bro, like people trying to do what we do? And not that many people have done it over the years, but I think recently, more in the past few years, people were like, oh, maybe like, I do want to talk about it too, you know, and I have a voice, you know, and I have a perspective, so I think that's good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I can't follow in the food content, but you know, for the
you can eat food too. It's not that hard.
Oh, I love to eat. I can't do that. That is a skill.
Yeah, you can do that.
That's another skill. But thank you so much, and we appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for wearing your Linsanity shirt.
Yes. That was
just coached the G Leaguers in the Rising Stars Challenge.
I heard about that.
Weekend.
Yeah.
Jay Lynn.
Yeah. Cool.
Paper
Awesome.
Sons Cafe, come here. And
Paper
you
Sons.
might walk in on like a really deep Asian American podcast. Like these guys they're tuning in. They're locked in. We got a live audience here.
Thank you to Paper Sons for allowing us to host in this space, and please come check them out.
We took up a bunch of seats here while it's snowing outside.
Yeah.
You guys could have been making money, but we got cameras and tripods here instead, so thank you.
Cool. Thank you.